Almost here. This is better. That's better than yeah, here we are. Yeah.
Whoops,
Well, you wait.
that's, there you were.
Looks like you're still in it.
We still have the owl.
Where am I? There we go.
With the new building, with our, when the technology. This is. It's just,
You all in?
I mean, it shows everything better.
Yes.
So much stuff.
Okay, cool.
Go together.
Laptop.
It's, you know, okay. We're here and, I'm gonna call the meeting to order. A number of people either aren't here yet. I'm trying to think of who. Ezra, is he the only other one? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No, I guess Ezra may be the only outstanding person I haven't heard from him. Hopefully they'll be along. In the meantime, Lydia, would you told me?
I will do it.
Thank you.
I do have to find it.
Okay. I don't think anyone on the screen or any members of the public have signed in. So is anybody here want to make a public comment before we get underway? No? Okay, moving right on. Public meeting minutes of November 18th were sent out. Ezra sent the initial version out and I made a number of edits to it and sent it out. I think last week. So earlier, yeah, last week. Any comments or edits on that? If not, would there be a motion to approve the minutes of November 18th?
I'll make the motion to accept and to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
All in favor? Opposed? Okay, good. Donations. Lydia detailed the source of the donations of $185.25. Is there a motion to accept the donation?
Make a motion to accept the donation as stated.
Second? Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Opposed? Here it is.
So sorry.
Lydia started in your place.
Appreciate you.
Okay. Melanie is playing down here tonight. This is the night of the Oyster River High School Christmas concert. So because I think her daughter who's over there. So that's why she's not here tonight. She emailed me earlier her comments and she and I talked this afternoon on the phone. You all had a chance to look at the financials. I sent them with the agenda. And I'm not going to read it to you, but because usually she'll go and just remind you what we've made in interest on various accounts, but that was detailed in the account itself. Any questions about those financials? No. Okay. She mentioned that we have a CD at TD Bank. The balance in that CD is, I forget, 22,000 and change, something like that. I'm sorry, I didn't bring my iPad, which is working those reports. She recommended that we talk at this point, since we're at the end of the project, we have had to dip further into that, that we should consider putting some or all of those funds in a CD. I asked her if, and she sent us out, which I also forwarded to you, these interest rates at for Seacoast Bank as well as at TD. When I asked her today, is it important for some reason that we keep those funds at TD? Should we consider moving them in full for Seacoast? She's recommended that we remove the funds and basically close out the account at TD Bank. She said it would be much easier for the treasurer to have all the funds in one bank. And so that was her recommendation. I don't think we need to wait until she's here at our January meeting to make that action. So her recommendation is that we move the balance of those funds to First Seacoast and that we proceed to invest whatever amount the board feels is reasonable. My suggestion, my suggestion would be that we invest, take out a $20,000 CD, that we put the balance, which is pretty much interest earned, in the trustees' general operating account.
Are we gonna keep any money?
That
in
would,
Cash?
that would be the
Emergency something.
20,000 and change. You have the numbers in front of you, Lydia. Do you want to tell us what that amount is?
2,400, what's it called?
2,000, it's 20,000.
22,000.
22,000.
Average is 22,000.
So we would be adding the 2,000, and the account that we have at First Seacoast is around 10,000 something. That's the general operations at First Seacoast.
Yeah.
10,000.
Also, you all have your reports there, and I don't. Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
So if you agree with Melanie's recommendation, the motion would be to close the TD Bank general operations account, move the balance to First Seacoast Bank. We could do this in two motions if you want, and then a second motion to talk about the CD. Is that the first? Oh, and so let's do that first motion.
Motion to do what you said.
And
I'm sorry, Con, but sometimes.
This motion to move the money. Or to do
So this is, the motion is to close the TD Bank account, move the funds to First Seacoast Bank. And that's the motion.
I'm sorry, is there something?
And Caroline made and Lydia seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The second motion would be to invest $20,000 in a CD at First Seacoast Bank. Melanie's recommendation is that we do it as a 6-month. She said that way we'll have one maturing in March or so, one in September. This would be a midpoint.
I mean, it's not.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, and that will leave the balance, that will increase the general fund checking to about, well, $13,000. And if we decide we don't need all of that money on hand, then we can always add to another CD when it's yours. Okay. Dan's not here. We kind of usually, if Dan's here, he usually gives us a report of anything of interest at the select board.
Select Board met on December 1st and finalized the operating budget and the warrant articles to be presented at a public hearing on January 5th. That's a Monday. They canceled their December 8th meeting because as a result of finalizing everything ahead of the budget public hearing, there was nothing on the agenda, no reason to meet on December 8th. We always schedule that for the opportunity to make sure there's plenty of time to discuss and deliberate. But when we come to agreement sooner, we have that benefit. So other than that, the select board at their December 1st meeting, processed the consent agenda as anticipated, and I can't think of any other actions that would have been impactful or of interest to library trustees. But certainly, if there's any questions about anything budget or warrant related, happy to answer them.
It seemed to me like the budget process went pretty smoothly.
Fortunately, yes. Yeah, I think we've invested a lot of time and effort to optimize the process. One of the things I'm most proud of is the entire budget binder, which is hundreds of pages of documentation about every detail of the line items and how we arrive at the numbers that we do. We make that information available electronically the same day that the select board and advisory budget committee get their printed budget binders. And so by shining a spotlight on the process and inviting everybody in to take a look and make suggestions and recommendations, it really removes a lot of the low-hanging fruit for folks to take issue with or be concerned about. Now, the numbers, and if you don't like them, or if you have a philosophical disagreement with them, then that's one thing. But by optimizing the process, we've been able to make it more efficient. The select board 2 years ago deferred all of the presentations to the advisory budget committee. let them take a deep dive, which allows the select board to focus on the bigger picture, longer term issues facing the town leading up to the warrant. And so the select board, gosh, I want to say for 6 of the 7 years I've been here, the select board has not made any adjustments to the operating budget different than what the advisory budget committee recommended. And so that same thing held true this year. And so it's, so I think it's good. It gets the information out there, gives people a longer opportunity to review it. So, yeah, we're very glad with the efficiency for sure.
Any more articles that we can get in?
There's going to be quite a few. So it's looking like there's going to be somewhere between like 7 and 9 zoning amendments. So those are already the numbering wise by statute. Those are numbered following the election of officers, which is Article 1. And then the operating budget and then the regular warrant articles, it's looking like somewhere around 20. We have 2 petitioned articles at this point relative to the land use change tax that goes to the conservation fund and the creation of an invasive species capital reserve for the Barrington's waters. Those were petitioned together. We're aware of one other petition warrant article that's being collected signatures for relative to increasing the service connected total disability credit. The previous maximum was $4,000, which Barrington provides. And there was legislation over the summer that increases that maximum amount of the credit to $5,000. So this would be a petition warrant article to bring it to $5,000. So we haven't received that one yet. Folks have until January 13th. So that number yet to be firmly decided, but there's a couple of warrant articles the select board is sponsoring outside of the normal cycle. One, a couple as a result of legislation this year, one relative to Keno. Keno in New Hampshire was always an opt-in situation. So a community, or in the case of the city council had to vote actively and say, we will allow Keno games to be played at appropriate facilities in our community. Legislation changed this summer that says it's an opt-out. So by default, I think it's 2027, June of 2027, Keno will be allowed everywhere in the state unless a community votes to set up. Now, Barrington has voted 3 years in a row to say we don't want Keno in Barrington. So the select board is sponsoring a warrant article to prohibit Keno in Barrington and let the voters decide. There's a similar article as a result of similar legislation for games of chance. So these charity casinos have really grown in popularity in New Hampshire. And so what the state has done through the legislature said, a community can vote to prohibit games of chance, the issuance of licenses for games of chance in a community. And so that article will be on the warrant also. We'll be closing the community center, Library Community Center Capital Reserve and making a off-cycle large contribution proposal to the Library Technology Capital Reserve Fund to fully fund that technology plan through, I think, 2029 or 2030. Mm-hmm. And so that adds to the numbers a little bit, but all the normal contributions to heavy equipment and fire trucks and paving and all that.
Connor, I know the addition to the library capital reserve would only go forward if the other
Correct.
one is closed, but is it possible that the other would be closed and the funds not be transferred?
So that if the voters don't approve the contribution to the Library Technology Capital Reserve, that's a possible outcome.
Okay.
And so the value in my mind of making those contingent and keeping them together on the warrant is closing the Library Community Center Capital Reserve will have a net positive impact on tax rate, and that will be listed, that will be clear. And then the corresponding contribution to the Library Technology Capital Reserve will still leave $13,000 that goes to, it essentially goes to unassigned fund balance, but in a weird accounting way, but goes back to the taxpayers. And so keeping those together, I think, encourages voters, and certainly folks in the library community will be able to articulate that approving both of these articles reduces the tax rate and is good for the community. And we'll be able to include in the voter guide details like, here is the link to the library technology capital plan. And this contribution will fund that plan through 2029. And we might not expect to see a contribution to this capital reserve until 2028, 2029. barring anything unanticipated. So I think that's helpful.
Yep.
But it is a possible outcome
I
if
just-
one passes and one fails.
I knew, I knew the addition to the tech couldn't happen unless the other was closed. I didn't know if it was mutually, which didn't necessarily make a lot of sense because the project's over, so. Okay.
Mr. Drew, you had something?
Those casinos donate a lot to charity and different organizations.
Mm-hmm.
I think they have to donate 35% or something like that, and then the state gets 10-15%.
Yeah, and I think, similar to the discussions around Keno, I think the wisdom of Concord in approaching these things in this way is that it's not a one size fits all for every community. And so what that means for games of chance and Keno, if a community, and I think Barrington's a good example of that, if a community doesn't have the support services or the infrastructure to really support something like that, an intensive use like that, that attracts people from outside and whatnot, then it can become a burden on the community. Now, certainly, cities and larger towns that already have the infrastructure and are built up around a industry of bringing people to the community and supporting them in appropriate ways. So yeah, I think it's then that's why I think the people get to decide, right? The residents of Barrington get to decide, do we want to have an opportunity for the state to issue a gaming license, a game of chance license in the town of Barrington? Truth be told, nobody's knocking on the door to stand up a Revo casino in Barrington. And so I think the point's probably moot. I don't think there's a lot of demand, especially where we have options in Rochester and Dover. So
Yeah.
close.
They,
Yeah.
cities that have a lot more population, plus like to go to something that they can do other things around it.
Of course.
What else they can do in Barrington?
Yeah. So there was legislation.
The Christmas stuff.
Yeah, exactly, right? Buy some Kayla. So the legislation, there was legislation 2 years ago, which allowed charity casinos to provide the charitable contributions that they're required to make to the host communities. So like Salem, for example, was one of the first that received the contribution. So if you have a charitable gaming facility in your community, you're eligible to apply for those charitable funds, just like any other applicable organization. And so they haven't received a ton of money. And so, the impact, it's tough too, because, nonprofit, you don't pay taxes, property taxes. And so it's an interesting dynamic, but the residents will get to decide.
Yeah, I think with casinos every month and give it to somebody different.
Yeah, I think, they'll manage a little bit different. The library foundation
The life foundation benefit from it.
received a contribution.
Visiting nurses benefit
Right.
from it, which serves our community. A
I'm
lot.
curious,
Yes.
has any thought been given to limiting it to 1 or 2 licenses or in a town? Or is it take it or leave it kind of?
So interestingly, I learned, so the select board had some questions, the legislation went through Concord. I brought the select board's attention, hey, start thinking about this. They have some questions, and it gave me an opportunity to talk to some folks at the Lottery Commission. The state of New Hampshire has actually issued a stay on any new games of chance licenses through like 2027, 2028. So they feel that the market is saturated and they're in a good spot. They want to see how things play out before they start issuing more. And so the state manages that through the Lottery Commission and the licensing of the games of chance. There's no, as it exists right now, there's no ability for a municipality to regulate in that way. So that's New Hampshire doesn't have home rules, so everything is trickled down from the state. They delegated us the authority to be able to say, hey, we don't want games of chance licenses in our community. They'll listen, but we don't have the ability to put other strings on that. One of the questions the select board had was, what if a local church wants to have a bingo night? And so those would similarly be prohibited because you need a license for the games of chance. What I learned from the folks at the Lottery Commission is even a one-off event for game of chance, like a church bingo night, has to meet all the same criteria as a full-blown brick and mortar games of chance location. Surveillance, the permitting, the license, everything. And so what they explained is the requirements are so burdensome that folks don't do that. What happens is churches will go to like a brick and mortar game of chance that already has a license and say, hey, can we host an event here? And so that's kind of how those one-off events happen. And obviously there's the ability to apply for a share of the proceeds. So, yeah, it was interesting to learn. Like I said, nobody's knocking on the door. We don't issue, we haven't had anybody looking for a game chance variance.
Oh, no, I had, just a couple other questions on
Yes.
the budget and that whole
Please.
process. And anybody who's watching, if you're on any of the Barrington social media sites, people are predictably upset with the tax bills they recently received, which always makes me nervous about how long will that angst linger
No
to
question.
March. Do you have any information about the school budget?
No.
Hmm.
I have fortunately no responsibility for the school budget,
Well,
and,
that's
and there's no information on the school budget available on the website.
interesting. It always surprises me that people rant and rave about the town side. And this is not a complaint about the school and their performance, but you could practically eliminate the entire town and you're still not going
One
to
of the,
make it that.
yeah, one of the select boards, so they have 12 identified goals in their strategic plan, and one of those goals is civic education. And part of the motivation for that is they feel that there's a big disconnect between how folks, residents in town feel or believe that their governments are run and their funds are spent and how they really are. And so we've invested a lot of time and effort to try to figure out how to do that. One of the things we've had great success with is sharing information with tax bill inserts. So everybody that receives a tax bill receives an information insert. And so one of the things we did back in May, and we included it in the second issuance bill as well, was it's a bar chart that shows for the average home in Barrington that pays $8,748 in taxes, how many dollars are going to which jurisdiction and for what purpose. So, we broke out the school with high school and middle school and, elementary school and administrative services and the town and then the county. And, it's really, as a graphical representation, it's really great because 25% of every dollar that you spend goes to high school tuition, just high school education for Barrington. And then you can look down and see that, that when you add up all of the impact from town services, so from police and fire to library, recreation, everything in between, at 17%, that's almost identical to the operations of just the elementary school. And so I think that's helpful for folks to understand. And so, yeah, you're never going to bridge that whole gap. One thing I know the school is faced with this year, they received a 35% increase to their health premiums. So they're
That's right, they got streamed on that.
Yeah, so they received a $421,000 unanticipated bill for health premiums from school care as a result of, they didn't anticipate the claims that they experienced. And so they had to come up with $421,000 to pay. And then not surprisingly, their premiums, now they didn't raise enough in premiums the prior year. They're going to expect premiums to go up in the next year. So they're going to make up all that
Really
and more. So the impact of that is 35% increase on premiums. And the school district in the collective bargaining agreements, the school district contributes between 72 and 75% of the premiums for the plans that they offer. And so, that's a big impact. The superintendent shared with me that just health insurance increase alone was $1 million increase on the budget. And so, I don't expect the increase to be small.
Well, I hope they do a good job at informing people, which is a challenge because we don't have newspapers that really reach us. So,
Right.
Well, thank you for filling in for Dan.
Oh, of course, anytime.
We haven't gotten to your.
I am not a one-for-one replacement. Let's be clear on that. I'm short 2 Purple Hearts. I'm short doctor of medicine.
It's been very helpful as we've gone through the this project. These papers, I think, very helpful suggestions.
Yeah.
So we're up to Lydia's report, and you all got Lydia's written report. So I encourage Lydia to focus on policy.
Yes. So this policy was heavily borrowed from Manchester Public Library through advocacy with the New Hampshire Trustee Library Association. So it made sense out what Primex and Manchester's attorney had come up with for their town, and really recommended that each library take it and utilize it to save each library the money from having to go to Primex themselves and the attorneys, what have you. Carolina did have a question because it doesn't say in the, even in the law, it doesn't say what constitutes a minor.
What age?
It's,
Yeah,
in the state of New Hampshire, it's 18.
that's what I thought, but it's not in it. So.
No, and I printed the law itself out so that if you had a question, you could read it.
And I think that's important because I think we changed our policy a few years ago that students or people who are 16 years or older can get a card on their own without the parent's signature. Younger than that, we required a parent's signature because the parents was assuming the financial responsibility for lost items and such. But so even that students have their own card is still subject to this law.
Absolutely. And in the training that I gave in our micro meeting this past week, I said that it's going to be important for us to let young adults know that this law is in effect and that their parents will have access to all print materials and audio, physical things. They're not getting the right to any history or digital stuff. Anything that they're borrowing from Libby or people are and all, no, the records are not included in this law.
Oh, okay, and also if they do searches on the computers in the library.
No, the only thing that they are able to get is a printout of what currently is out on that Charles Park. That's it.
Good, okay.
And we don't have the access to their internet history either, do we? I mean, it wipes out.
It wipes out after each usage.
So that, by law, they can't see what, of course, I was going to ask for a code to use the computer. That can't be tracked back to me. Someone to build some bones.
Did you hear what he said?
No, I
I'm
didn't follow.
not gonna ask him to retrieve it. He's trying to be funny.
Oh, okay.
If,
Must have succeeded.
And I missed it.
We all missed it.
so after each usage, the computer is completely clean.
Okay.
And parents have to fill out, I know you have that form, they
Yeah.
have to fill out a form actually requesting.
Yes, so anyone that comes in asking, requesting for those records, we will have them fill this out. And what we'll do is scan it and upload it to their personal record, to the child. So that when we see that that's there, before we get that out,
And that'll be a permanent part of that person's
record.
record. So I was gonna say, so if another parent wanted to look, they would
They
ultimately,
can fill it.
but it's, and that way we can prove that we follow the law. Is that the real reason for this form?
Yes, and also, to maintain that if there's two households, you can't go by this same address. So one parent will get a little bit more scrutiny than the other, depending on the, non-custodial parent. We will have to show that they are actually the child.
Are there any safeguards on the computers at all for children?
Not filters.
No, no.
Anybody have any questions? I presume you read this. I really, Lydia, like the way you're laying out policies. It seems to me it used to be paragraphs and paragraphs of detail. And if this is clear, then it's the policy. Yes, please do. And the bullet points, easy to read.
I agree.
Yeah, thank you.
No comments, questions? Other?
No, thank you so much for.
Yeah, that's how we're figuring out how to use.
So is there a motion to approve the privacy policy and parental access to minor children's records? And this is effective January 1.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anything else?
Yeah, the one thing that I talked to Susan after I sent out my report. talking to her about not being able to find the funding for our EDDM mailing, the bulk mailing, that we want to be able to do twice a year. We had a conversation with the Friends, and I think in August, and they paid for it last year. But they were really feeling like the postage was getting too expensive, the printing, what have you. But we do have a lot of people in town that do not rely on email. They don't get the newspaper. That really is the only way for
And
us
they may
to
not
let
be on
them,
social media.
And people are
to let them know what's happening at the library, or even that we're here.
We used to have the town newsletter, isn't it? They talk about resurrecting that.
Yeah.
I think that'd be, you can have ads in it, on the paper itself,
That was like-
businesses put ads in.
I might have been on the select board even because it was getting expensive. It was getting to be like 10,000, we talked about the advertising and that.
Old book.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was, and I loved it because I'm old fashioned. It came in paper and I could see what was going on with everything and stick my calendar. And, times have moved on since that, but
What is the cost?
So I got, and it's, the last one we did is pretty small. It's a 6.5 by 9 postcard, two-sided. But Allegra Marketing and Print said that we could do a full page and the postage would be the same,
8.5 by 11.
an 8.5 11 postcard. And the postage would be the same because it would be going by weight. So the full size is $13.55. And then the 6.5 by 9 is $9.79. And I did a little checking on what the postage, how much it's gone up. So we paid $946.41 to mail it in May. And it's gone up a bit. We mailed 4,183 pieces, and it would be $1,033.20 for the postage, in addition to the print.
So I'm not, I'm real quick, 1,000,
$13.55 for
a lot of
the
them.
full page, and that would be double-sided color. And then $1,033.20 roughly to mail it.
They said, but we got 4165 total patrons as of today, yesterday, whatever this was.
Yes, we're almost at 5,000.
So, or now I'm thinking a lot of those, maybe you could have 5 library cards in one home, so
Many of them are family, that was.
Right, so you don't have to mail one to every single person, just.
No,
But if you do an EBDM, which is the cheapest way to mail, it's not individually addressed.
Go see shops.
It just, it's like the junk mail you
Right.
get. Or political mailers, it's just put in every mailbox.
we use trustee funds to do this.
We could. I suggested to Lydia, since the Friends aren't meeting until the end of April, and I wasn't really involved, end of January. We really need to get this out, and I think doing it twice a year, at least at this point, we do one in advance of summer reading program.
Which is really great.
Which is really
Yeah, so-
important in this.
Ideally, I would like to send one either in December or first part of January, probably the first part of January. Because people are so busy not paying attention in December and they get so much stuff. So January and May would be the ideal dates for us to be sending them out.
So I don't know if you, the cost of doing this,
Was it $1,032?
That would be the postage,
that's the postage, and then the 1,300.
$13.55.
What's the large?
So 8.5 by 11 is $1,355 for printing.
Yeah.
And that's, they send us 5,000 pieces, because that's what that prints. But we only mail out 4,183, and then we leave the remainder in the library out for people to be able to take.
Which is great.
So 1,355 plus the 1,033,
Yeah,
and the smaller one is
$9.79 to print. And the same price to mail.
$2,388.20. So do the larger ones.
And 979 plus the one. I think it's a reasonable use of trustee funds at this point.
And it's you get twice as much on the largest sheet.
And maybe we
Doesn't
can ask if
cost
the
twice
French
as
were
much.
willing to cover the cost of the summer reading program one and the trustees.
I think the friends did say they would do once a year, right?
They didn't commit to do it.
Okay.
They said, they really wanted us to shop around and see if we could find somebody else to do it. But the foundation just stepped up and gave us $10,000 for the rest of our furniture. So I really didn't feel good about going and asking them.
Oh,
So I'm sensing that people are inclined to agree to have trustee funds used for this winter flyer. Do you want to do that at the tune of $2,012 or $2,388? The difference being the size of the mailer.
I'd like
Let's
to-
go with the large one, because it's twice as much, it doesn't cost almost $200 more.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
For a golden big.
So I would accept a motion to authorize expenditure of $2,388 of trustee funds for a EDGM mailer. Robert's making that
now
motion.
second.
Lydia's seconding. Is there, all in favor? Opposed? Okay.
Can I just ask you a question? Is everybody in town has to eat? And there's like 3 places in town to buy food. Is there any way to get the word out? Ask these vendors to put out the,
We did postings around town.
not posting, but not only posting, but like something set up if someone could take.
So
Has anyone
there
tried,
are people, there are places in town that put them up for us.
or put them up on the bulletin board?
Yeah.
But I mean, actually hand them out.
Oh, I don't
Actually,
do
they
that.
wouldn't do it,
Not really. They don't mind promoting stuff.
put it in the bag.
How about the town
You gotta get
hall?
the-
There's a little place where you can put a little stack of those, right?
We have a table right inside the town hall. I think there is library stuff on
And
it.
the town clerk's office is a great place for
Yes.
getting information out. That's where we ought to leave a bunch of the extra flyers.
Yeah.
Because people have to register their car and not,
Or you
I
don't.
mean, I do everything.
And recreation too.
Now, because I like to see
Recreation
the
would be.
Well, they might have a space once they get open.
recreation, yeah, once they're open.
They are very, Barrington is very good about promoting everybody's things.
Yeah,
And it's a way to get to the people, you know, that so busy playing pickleball, they don't bother with them.
so,
That
okay.
reach back.
Thank you. Was there anything else, Lydia?
I believe that's it.
Okay. Or for the other Lydia, friends report.
So I guess we made, I'm not sure the exact number, I want to say over $1,200 for our winter raffle.
Wow.
Yes, it's a great success. And one person amazingly enough wanted to. The first time it ever happened. And I mean, it wasn't anyone, it was like just someone in town, you know, and they wanted chances. I know, the chances.
How do we buy a lottery ticket?
Whoa.
What was it, they went both?
One person wanted 2 of them. Yeah, just picked her name twice out of 2 different baskets. And we said, well, it's
Good
literally.
luck to her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
Anything
really,
else from the friends?
that was the big.
That was
thing.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
The last meeting was snowed out.
No, we had your.
We had our meeting.
In December.
Yeah. And people showed up. I thought it was gonna be an empty room and everybody was here.
We sold the raffle prizes.
And you'll notice I did not put on the agenda this time, I didn't put a foundation reports. They didn't meet in the month of December. So they'll,
November.
November, December. They usually meet
Oh,
the
they,
first.
yeah, they didn't leave.
They didn't meet in December. They'll meet, I think, in January again. They're working on some material to be able to establish a plan giving opportunity, you know, to build it down. That's the ambitious plan. And I also didn't put a building project report because I think we're pretty much done. Well, the big outstanding item is, the One Source Security. We still have a large outstanding bill with them because, hopefully this week, Connor is, and I'm just Jim and working with One Source to try and finalize all the security on all the town buildings and get all machines talking to one another.
Right.
That should hopefully resolve our, main efforts and back efforts. And I think the only other thing on building is Lydia got from Jason Lacombe emergency exit plans to be posted around the building. So
There are
people know how to get out in case of emergency. So that's that on that. So Connor, town administrator.
Hello again. Still here?
I did, as you saw, don't have any questions about the MOU, but I wanted to remind people, we do have an MOU, and I don't know if you've looked at it recently, but how it's going from your perspective.
Yeah, I think terrific. I give your esteemed trustee chair a tremendous amount of credit for her work in doing that. And it was certainly a pleasure for me to work with her through that process. And I know nobody did it alone, and there was help throughout the process, but I think that document will be very helpful for not necessarily current trustees or current select board members or staff, but for the future. Things have a tendency to oscillate and change. And I think having guiding documents so folks can sit down and say, hey, people got together and said that this is where the guardrails ought to be, and this is how things ought to look. And so I think that's really helpful. The select board, for their purpose, establishing policies and procedures, is helpful to make sure that there is some continuity among different select board members, different select boards and their perspectives. Certainly they have the right to make different decisions, but I'm of the opinion that good government is stable and doesn't fluctuate or oscillate tremendously. And so a good MOU can do that. So.
Well, so far, I'm hearing good things as far as the relationship with the public. What do they call it? Public Works Department?
Public Works.
Public Works. And just, now we're into the snow season, so figuring out exactly, we've got a snow blower now and all that, making sure we're in compliance with whatever we have to be in compliance with as far as walkways open and handicapped access and all that stuff.
That was the only thing I noticed was, it says that the town is responsible for plowing or shoveling the sidewalks, but it doesn't say that the library provides the snow blower.
Well, I had built that in. I thought because it's going to be housed here and it's only used here.
Right.
It seemed like a reasonable expense out of the
Yeah,
project.
but just as Connor said, in the future, maybe, it seems like maybe that would be in it, that the library is responsible for the snow blower.
Well, we own one now. I guess the question will be if it breaks down, and how do we deal with some of that? The one other cost that we haven't gotten yet, we have new fire extinguishers everywhere. But we haven't had the cost. I don't know where that stands at this point. You haven't gotten anything further from Jim or school.
I asked him this when he said, "Oh, that man, you hadn't gotten the."
I think they're still going around. They were just at the town hall Thursday of last week.
So they did everything. They're checking all the buildings.
Finished.
It's also a service, well, that every year they have to be checked.
Yeah.
And sometimes have to be filled or adjusted. Right. That should probably be.
And I don't recall where that is, if that's in our budget or if you put it in the budget. I think Jim was giving us information about what to anticipate on those. Yeah.
Speaking of snow, I have yet another question. When I pulled up today, I noticed that the snow was covering the pillars on the roof.
Oh, yeah, that happens because that happens in anyone who has solar panels on the roof.
Right, but is there any way of melting that off? Or
No,
no?
you have to hope that you get enough
So-
sun and then it will melt it and then it'll slide off.
Really?
It's one of the reasons, it's a good thing we do have the ground mount because the snow doesn't, those are angled.
Yeah, they put it.
Such
more of a
that it
sound.
clears up.
Yeah, Jeff talked about that when he met with us last month, and he said,
He wasn't here at the last meeting.
yeah, I know, that's why.
You went in great depth on,
Oh,
there's not a whole lot to do.
Yeah.
I missed it. Maybe.
So I thought this is an opportunity for us to talk further about the compensation report. And I forwarded that report out to, it was like 38 pages or something like that. So I don't know if y'all read it. Or just cut to the appendices or whatever.
Happy to give a synopsis if it's helpful for anybody.
Yeah, give us your stuff.
So this is the third time the select board's done this since I've been here. So third time in 7 years. And this select board and the select boards prior are very interested in making data-driven decisions and keeping our total compensation not only balanced, but competitive in the labor market. And so we partnered with the same consultant each time, MRI, which is based in New Hampshire and does a lot of this work in New Hampshire. So their team has a lot of expertise. They understand the nuances of municipal positions and public sector employment in general. So this year, the select board is very important to the select board to do a total reward study. So looking at not only the value and comparability of wages, but also benefit levels and benefit costs. And so the same set of comparable communities was used as has been used in the past, which is helpful to collect data on the same group and see how the evolution happens. There's 40 different classifications or job roles, job descriptions that were included in the study. And so with a small organization, we have about 65 year-round employees across 40 different positions. So we don't have a lot of depth, right? Most of the positions that we have one person in that job role, obviously the exception of police and fire and highway. And so the process that they go through is just as much about internal equity as it is about external competitiveness. So they're looking at the labor market to get benchmarks of where these positions are compensated across the labor market so we can be competitive. And then they're also looking internally and saying, how are we comparing a transfer station attendant with a town clerk assistant, with a police officer, with a library director? And so that internal equity, that second part of what they do is based on a project they did for us back in 2019, which was they established a full rating manual with 10 criteria, and we can look at any job description and score a position based on all 10 of those criteria to see what the aggregate score or value of the position is in comparison to other positions. So
The higher the score, the higher the salary.
essentially, yep. So because we have a pay plan, there's grades, there's 15 grades and 13 steps. And so there's 9% between grades. So it's, you're in buckets, right? So you're in buckets with kind of point ranges. So yeah, that was work they did for us back in 2019. And so for internal equity, that's what they're leaning on. And that's why as part of the process, they collected all the job descriptions and also asked and encouraged employees to fill out a position analysis questionnaire, which allows an employee on their own, separate than what's recorded in their job description, to communicate to the consultants. This is what I really do. They ask questions like, what % of your time is focused on these job tasks? And they look and compare that to the job description and make recommendations to us if there are job descriptions that are out of date. Fortunately, we've done this enough. We didn't have many job descriptions that were out of date, but it's still a helpful part of the process. So anyways, they go and do the work and they collect the objective data. They start working on the internal equity, and then they start making recommendations. And so what they found in aggregate is that Barrington's total compensation was competitive. The challenge was the wage component of our total awards was about 11% in total on average across all 40 classifications, below what the market was paying. And our health benefit, our contribution to health benefit, which is the biggest of the, I'll say, discretionary benefits, because once you're in New Hampshire retirement, you can't get out, was about 10% higher than the market. And so that created a dynamic where for full-time benefit eligible employees, our total compensation was competitive in some, but it was the focus was shifted to those full-time employees and those employees that care about the health benefit, right? Because if you're a young firefighter and you don't care what the health insurance is, you just want to know how many zeros after the dollar sign in your paycheck, that dynamic isn't good. If you're a part-time employee that isn't benefit eligible, that dynamic also isn't good. And so what the team did is they made a series of recommendations that bring the total compensation a little bit more competitive, but more importantly, balanced. And so they recommended bringing wages up, and they recommended some changes to benefits, health benefit, not really bringing it down, but just taking the same amount of dollars and giving employees more options or better options so that we can attract and retain a diverse workforce. Right now, we only have 2 health plan options that are offered to employees. And I like to call them the Cadillac and the Rolls Royce plans. Like there's no kind of health plan option for somebody that doesn't have planned health utilization and doesn't want to spend money on health insurance. And so that's one of the things that is proposed to be added. And I can get into that in more detail. But anyway, so just kind of taking a fresh look at our health benefit and figuring out how to meter the costs to bring things down. Also made a recommendation to increase our contribution to the dental benefit from 50% to 75%. And so all of those changes, recommended changes, bring total rewards competitive and balanced. Or in terms of competitive, what the team did is they targeted the 60th percentile of the market. So not targeting the midpoint, not targeting the average, but targeting 10% better than the average. And so the value in doing that is kind of twofold. One, we want to be competitive. And so you're not necessarily competitive if you're paying as much as the average, right? But also the data they collect is in the summer of 1 year, and we implement the recommendations in April of the next year. So by the time we implement the data, there's like a 7 or 8 month lag. And so this kind of builds in a buffer to make sure that as soon as we implement the recommendations, it's not immediately out of date, which is really important. So objectively, they look at all of the positions and the external and the internal and the benefits, all, ignoring the incumbent people, right? This is a review of a position classification and what is the comparative value of this position to the organization, and how does that compare to comparable communities and what other communities are paying. And so what that means is it creates a minimum and maximum, and theoretically the idea is this job role is worth at least this much to the town and not more than this much to the town. And so you're not going to pay a custodian $100 an hour if they've been here for 50 years. Like there's an upper limit to what you're willing to pay to have a job role done. And so that's the guardrails that this process puts up in the pay plan. And so once all of that is resolved, then they move and focus on incumbent employees and placement of incumbent employees within the new pay plan. And so they have, they have a set of criteria that they use to guide those recommendations. One of the core recommendations or a couple of core recommendations, one, everybody comes to the first step. So if you have a pay plan that the labor market pays a lot more for a position than what we're paying now, and all of the employees are now below the first step, everybody comes up to the first step. Doesn't matter how much an increase it is. If you're saying that's how much you're willing to pay for a position, you're going to pay that much per position. You're going to do step one. One of the other criteria was making sure that every incumbent employee experienced a 3% individual wage increase as a minimum, reflective of that's just simply the cost of living over the last year. And so even if there are positions where the value of that position in terms of the minimum and maximum didn't change as much as others, because we studied the labor market and it said the labor market isn't paying a lot more for these positions than we're already paying. Still looking at the incumbent positions and saying those individuals ought to be experiencing a minimum of 3% increase as a result of that. Some other consideration for compression, where you might have an employee that moves up a lot to get to the first step, but then you have closed the gap. Maybe you have an 8-year incumbent employee and a 2-year incumbent employee, and now there's only 1 or 2 steps between them because you've compressed by bringing the newer employee up to step 1. We don't have a lot of those issues because, again, we're talking 65 employees over 40 classifications. So that isn't something we experience a lot of. So anyways, so the select board, the advisory budget committee had an opportunity to review the recommendations. The select board had an opportunity to review and discuss. the select board approved the recommendations and adopted the changes into the proposed operating budget. And subsequently, we negotiated with the police union, who has a contract that's due and will be on the ballot in March, with the recommended changes. And so I don't know if anybody's been a part of union discussions and negotiations before, but a tool like this is really valuable because it's objective, right? You go in and you say, this is what the data is. And so we had a meeting and a half, we had 1.5 meetings with the police union to come to a collective bargaining agreement. And that's reflective of the fact that there's nothing arguable, right? There's nothing, this is the numbers, this is the data. So it's a really valuable tool. I'm glad to have it. I'm glad that to be able to make public and everybody was able to see employees and otherwise. And so the plan from here. So the select board did that on at their December 1st meeting, and then every year we prepare a total rewards statement for employees. So this is where, because we spend so much money in benefit value, it's important that we communicate to employees that their value to the town is not just the wages that we pay them. Because for every dollar that we pay a regular employee, we pay 13 cents in the New Hampshire retirement system. For an employee who participates in a family health insurance plan, the town of Barrington pays $40,000 a year for their health premiums. And so it's important that we communicate this to employees and understand that, yes, you can go to the private sector and earn a lot more money, but the benefits that we're able to offer bring your total rewards package in a lot of cases higher than you would experience for a similar job role or stress level.
They get higher pay, they have to pay higher taxes, but they don't have to pay taxes on health and.
Precisely. So anyways, we issue a total reward statement. Usually we issue those with information about wage increases closer to April. But when we've done compensation studies in the past, especially when there's been changes to benefits, that impact employees differently, right? So one of the changes in the health insurance eliminates one of our plan options. So it changes it to the sister plan option. It's 80-10, it's 80-20. The biggest difference is instead of having a $10 copay and no deductible, there's a $20 copay and no deductible. But they're nearly identical otherwise. But that impacts employees that are enrolled in that 80-10 plan, whereas folks that aren't enrolled in that plan don't get it. Doesn't impact them. So we create personalized letters for every employee that explains what the impact of the changes would be to each of them relative to wage increases. One of the really valuable components of that is showing how much more room for growth there is in their position. We have employees who want to keep them, and by being able to show that now the new position maximum, the top step in your grade, is 12% higher than it was last year. So now you have that much more room to grow and earn higher wages if you stay in the town of Barrington, which is a great retention tool. But back to the total reward statement. So include that total reward statement in that letter to show, hey, this is what you have to look ahead to. Looking backwards, this is what your earnings were in the last year as actual. And so we hope, obviously we have to have the year end to be able to prepare those because we've got to get actuals from the 2025 year. So we're targeting maybe like the end of January, beginning of February to get those letters out, which will have individualized information for employees. And then obviously everything is contingent on town meeting vote. So nothing would go into effect until April in terms of wage changes. And the benefit changes, our coverage period starts in July. So those changes would take effect in July.
And if there is if we ended up with a default,
Yes.
then there would be no change in April. And not even under the old system. Or it's not like we don't get this new chart, we're stuck with the old chart, where
Well,
people get a step, they don't get any step.
Correct.
Like, there'll be a change because regardless of the budget, the health insurance premium is gonna go up.
Yeah, so default budget does a lot of really funny things, and we prepare and anticipate for those so that we know what steps will need to be taken. There are some costs that you can't include in a default budget, but you don't really have a lot of good options for funding in a default budget, right? So health insurance is a good example. Barrington, fortuitously, Barrington's health premium increases from the coverage period going right now to the coverage period starting July 2026 is an average of 7%, which is, it's crazy to say that 7% is extremely low. But as we talked about earlier, the schools is 35%. The average across health trust is in the teens.
Yeah.
And so the reason, really don't need to get into the weeds, but this is kind of like a 1-year benefit that the town has because Health Trust, our health insurance provider, they changed the rules on what constitutes a small group. So they're a pool, so they pool risk, but it's not all one size fits all. If you're an organization with greater than 50, and I'll just leave it at 50 for now, I'll explain why in a second. But if you're greater than 50, you're a large group. And what that means is your individual experience directly affects your premiums. And when you're a small, large group, which Barrington was, they have to build in the unknown factor because you're so small. You could have one claim that completely throws out the premiums to claim ratio, and you're done. And so they build in a big increase in premiums to try to help cover that a little bit. So, anyways, it used to be Health Trust. That 50 number was the number of employees eligible to have your health insurance. No. And so we make our health insurance benefit available to all of our employees.
Okay.
Now, we subsidize the cost for full-time employees. If you're 30 hours, we'll subsidize for an individual plan. And if you're 35 hours or more, we'll subsidize up to a family plan. And that subsidy is, the premium cost share, right? So, but all of our employees and retirees are eligible for a health benefit. And so we have many more than 50 employees that are eligible for the health insurance and by the definition of large group. Anyways, they changed their definition this year, starting July 1st, 2026, so that a large group is over the rolling lapse of 12 months having 50 enrollees. We have 33 enrollees. So we are transitioning to a small group. Now, the benefit of being a small group is there are thousands of covered individuals across small groups in New Hampshire. And so we benefit from the claims experience of the mass. And now one thing that means is there's not much we can do on our own to positively impact our health premiums, right? We could be the healthiest cohort of people in all the state, but we're paying the same as the sickest cohort in the small group. But the premiums are much lower. And so our premiums are going up, but only 7%, whereas the average for health trust is in the teens. So it's like a one-time reprieve. We get this like one, and it's very fortuitous with the implementation of the total compensation study, because we're able to balance our total rewards without really taking a lot away. We're just making minor adjustments. And so that's fortunate.
So what Connor kindly shared with me the application of the step and grade system to the library employees earlier. This has not been shared with employees of the information that people would get at the end of the month. And by way of reminder, in our MOU, we agreed to abide by the assignment of positions to specific grades. We retain the authority to put people at what step we think they should be at. What the select board has done is approve budgets based on the recommendations. And so I want to share with you, I haven't sent this out.
Okay.
Because I did not want a lot of stuff floating around.
Yeah, that's fair.
Ethernet, not that I don't trust you folks, but it's a stiff. And we could go into non-public at this point, so we can share that information and have that discussion, because there are a couple of areas that I think it's important for you to really think about. So with that, and would like you to stay for that discussion.
Terrific. Be glad to.
In order to do that, we would need to have a vote to go into non-public. And you may remember that somebody has to make that motion. It is for personnel, and I forget what code that is. We can fill in the code. Pardon?
You have to have a voice vote too.
Yeah, and we have to have a voice vote. So is there a motion to go into
Make a
non-public?
motion to go in a public session.
Is there a second to the motion? And we're gonna do a roll call. Robert,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Ezra?
Yeah.
Susan, yes. Lydia?
Yes,
And, okay, we're in non-public. I'm gonna close the door and Lydia is gonna take us off the public screen.